Do you remember the loud arguments and endless laughter of All in the Family, 1971? On screen, it was comedy, but off screen, life was far more complicated. From false death rumors to failed surgeries and quiet tragedies, the cast paid a heavy price after fame. Join us as we uncover the truth and honor the legacies they left behind. Sally Struthers as Gloria Stivic. Sally Struthers was born on July 28, 1947, in Portland, Oregon. At 24 years old, she played Gloria Stivic, the conflicted, outspoken daughter in All in the Family, 1971. Gloria became the emotional pressure point of the series, where youthful idealism collided with parental authority. That tension reflected Struthers' own upbringing. When she was 9, her father left the family, forcing her mother to raise 2 daughters alone while working at the Bonneville Power Administration and battling severe depression. The household was unstable and emotionally quiet. By the time Struthers appeared in 5 Easy Pieces, 1970, and The Getaway, 1972, independence had already replaced security. Adult life brought little relief. In 1977, she married psychiatrist William C. Reiner, and their daughter Samantha soon followed. The marriage strained under incompatible expectations and constant work pressure. They divorced in 1983, leaving Struthers to navigate single motherhood while still under public scrutiny. Career success came with confinement. Struthers won 2 Emmy Awards for Gloria but felt trapped by the role, leading to a 1974 contract lawsuit demanding creative growth. Work continued in television, animation, and theater, yet momentum slowed. Years later, Gilmore Girls offered renewed visibility through her role as Babette Dell, though the earlier peak never fully returned. Today, Sally Struthers is 79 years old and still working. She continues appearing in television and stage projects while maintaining a quieter life. Her estimated $6 million net worth, built from All in the Family, long-running TV roles, and theater work, reflects a career shaped by endurance rather than ease. Carroll O'Connor as Archie Bunker. Carroll O'Connor was born on August 2, 1924, in Manhattan, New York. At 47 years old, he played Archie Bunker, the volatile working-class patriarch, in All in the Family, 1971. The character became the engine of the show's impact, forcing audiences to confront prejudice through laughter that often cut too close. That power on screen came from a life already shaped by pressure. O'Connor grew up in Queens in a strict Irish Catholic household with 2 brothers, finished high school, then left college when World War II began. He served as a merchant seaman during the war, crossing the Atlantic on dangerous routes. Years later, while still struggling for steady roles, he appeared in films like Cleopatra, 1963, and In Harm's Way, 1965, learning patience in obscurity. Success did not bring peace at home. O'Connor married Nancy Fields in 1951, and they adopted a 6-day-old baby boy, Hugh O'Connor, in Rome in 1962. As All in the Family and later In the Heat of the Night made Carroll a television giant, Hugh fell into severe drug addiction. In 1995, Hugh died by suicide at age 32, only weeks after becoming a father, shattering the marriage's emotional center. The loss was followed by declining health. O'Connor underwent open-heart bypass surgery in 1989, then later surgery on a blocked carotid artery. He lived with diabetes, managed daily medication, and continued working while campaigning publicly against drug dealers. His later appearances, including TV films tied to In the Heat of the Night, carried visible physical strain. Sadly, he died at 76 on June 21, 2001, from a heart attack caused by complications of diabetes in Culver City, California. He was buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery, with a cenotaph honoring Hugh placed on his gravestone. His estimated $20 million net worth, earned from All in the Family, Archie Bunker's Place, In the Heat of the Night, and real estate, stood beside a legacy marked by fame, grief, and unresolved pain. Rob Reiner as Michael Stivic. Rob Reiner was born on March 6, 1947, in New York City. At 24 years old, he played Michael Meathead Stivic, the idealistic, confrontational son-in-law, in All in the Family, 1971. The role sharpened the show's ideological clash and turned political debate into weekly television. That confidence masked early pressure. Reiner grew up under the shadow of his father, comedian Carroll Reiner, in a household steeped in fame and expectation. Identity came with comparison, not freedom. He left UCLA without graduating and pushed into acting and writing, appearing in shows like The Partridge Family while struggling to separate himself from his father's legacy. Marriage added strain. Reiner married actress Penny Marshall in 1971 and adopted her daughter Tracy. As All in the Family dominated his schedule, creative tension and differing ambitions widened the gap. The marriage ended in 1981, leaving Reiner emotionally unmoored and deeply focused on work. Work became transformation. Reiner pivoted to directing, reshaping his career with This Is Spinal Tap, Stand By Me, and later, When Harry Met Sally, and A Few Good Men. He remarried Michelle Singer in 1989, finding greater stability while channeling emotion into filmmaking and political activism. Tragically, he died at 78 years old on December 14, 2025, after being fatally stabbed alongside his wife Michelle at their Los Angeles home. His estimated $200 million net worth, earned through directing, producing, and long-term investments, closed a life marked by creative reinvention and a shocking, violent end. Jean Stapleton as Edith Bunker. Jean Stapleton was born on January 19, 1923, in Manhattan, New York. At 48 years old, she played Edith Bunker, the soft-voiced, devoted wife, in All in the Family, 1971. Her calm presence steadied the series, turning Edith into its emotional conscience. That gentleness was built through discipline, not ease. Stapleton grew up in New York with an opera singer mother and entered theater young, debuting on stage in her teens. By the 1950s, she worked steadily on Broadway in productions like Bells Are Ringing and Damn Yankees. Political tensions of the era slowed her television work, forcing years of waiting and repetition. Her private life carried equal weight. In 1957, she married theater director William Putch, and together they raised 2 children while running summer stock theater. All in the Family brought fame but also separation, with long shoots keeping her away from home. In 1983, Putch died suddenly of a heart attack at 60, leaving Stapleton widowed and quietly isolated. Illness arrived without spectacle. In her later years, Stapleton lived with Alzheimer's disease, requiring constant care as memory failed. She withdrew from public life, ending appearances after projects like You've Got Mail, 1998, and final stage work in 2002. Sadly, she died at 90 on May 31, 2013, at her Manhattan apartment due to Alzheimer's complications. She was cremated, with a cenotaph placed at Lincoln Cemetery in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, and Broadway dimmed its lights in tribute. Her estimated $8 million net worth, built from All in the Family and decades of theater, closed a life defined by restraint, endurance, and quiet sorrow. Danielle Brisebois as Stephanie Mills. Danielle Brisebois was born on June 28, 1969, in Brooklyn, New York. At 9 years old, she played Stephanie Mills, Archie Bunker's sharp, vulnerable niece, in All in the Family, 1978. The role injected youthful tension into the series, forcing adult conflicts to be seen through a child's unprotected eyes. That exposure arrived early in her childhood. Brisebois grew up in Brooklyn in a working family with no public childhood scandal, yet sudden fame disrupted stability at home. School, family time, and privacy were quickly replaced by sets and schedules. By the time she appeared on Broadway as Molly in Annie, the pressure to stay successful had already begun shaping her sense of self. Relationships struggled to keep pace. As a teenager and young adult, work dominated her time, and early romances ended quickly. Emotional bonds were often postponed for studios and rehearsals. Years later, she found balance when she married musician Nick Lashley in 2013, building a quieter family life with their twin daughters, Charlotte and Lola. Career shifts came with cost. Moving from child acting into music meant walking away from security and facing skepticism. She traded visibility for isolation, long studio hours, and creative risk. That gamble eventually paid off through songwriting success, including global hits like Unwritten and Pocketful of Sunshine, and an Oscar-nominated song, Lost Stars. Now, Danielle Brisebois is 57 years old and still active behind the scenes. She works as a songwriter and producer while living privately in Los Angeles. Her estimated $4 million net worth, built largely from music royalties and production work, reflects a life redirected, not upward, but inward, toward control and calm. Isabel Sanford, as Louise Jefferson. Isabel Sanford was born on August 29, 1917, in Harlem, New York. At 54 years old, she played Louise "Wheezy" Jefferson, a woman balancing dignity and endurance in All in the Family, 1971. The role laid the foundation for the Jeffersons, turning Sanford into a historic television figure. Her strength was forged in pain. Sanford grew up in a violent household and ran away at 14 to escape her father's abuse. With little protection and no safety net, she worked odd jobs and performed in small venues. Years later, roles in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and stage productions kept her afloat, not secure. Marriage offered no refuge. She married William Richmond in 1945, had 3 children, and entered a relationship marked by pressure and instability. The marriage ended in 1950, leaving Sanford alone with children and financial strain. For years, survival mattered more than ambition. Stress followed her success. As the Jeffersons exploded in popularity, Sanford became the first black woman to win an Emmy for lead actress in a comedy series, yet carried decades of accumulated strain. Heart disease developed quietly, worsened by years of overwork and emotional exhaustion. Isabel Sanford died at 86 years old on July 9, 2004, from heart disease, 5 days after hospitalization in Los Angeles. She was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park, Hollywood Hills, and honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Her estimated $3 million net worth, earned through the Jeffersons, awards, and property, closed a life defined by survival before celebration. Sherman Hemsley, as George Jefferson. Sherman Hemsley was born on February 1, 1938, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. At 35 years old, he played George Jefferson, the loud, combative, upward-striving neighbor in All in the Family, 1973. The character detonated class and race tension on screen and became so powerful that it demanded its own universe in The Jeffersons. That explosive presence grew out of emotional absence. Hemsley was raised by his mother alone and did not meet his father until age 14, a gap that shaped his withdrawn nature. He dropped out of high school after the 10th grade, joined the U.S. Air Force for 4 years, then worked days at the U.S. Postal Service while studying acting at night. By the early 1970s, Broadway roles like Pearlie gave him credibility but no security. Fame did not bring connection. Hemsley never married and had no children. Instead, he lived privately, surrounding himself with collections, most famously, hundreds of dolls. Relationships remained brief, carefully guarded, and rarely acknowledged. Work continued but narrowed. After the Jeffersons, Hollywood offered fewer risks and more repetition, feeding isolation and periods of depression in the 1990s. He found alternate outlets through music, releasing the R&B album Dance, and through later television roles like Amen and voice work on Dinosaurs. The work paid bills, not peace. Sadly, he died at 74 years old on July 24th, 2012, from lung cancer, complicated by superior vena cava syndrome, at his home in El Paso, Texas. His body remained unburied for months during a bitter estate dispute before he was laid to rest at Fort Bliss National Cemetery with full military honors. His estimated $1.2 million net worth, earned from the Jeffersons and music royalties, closed a life remembered for volume on screen and silence off it. Mike Evans as Lionel Jefferson. Mike Evans was born on November 3, 1949, in Salisbury, North Carolina. At 22 years old, he played Lionel Jefferson, the intelligent, restrained son of George and Louise, in All in the Family, 1971. Lionel offered contrast, grounding confrontation with thought, and later bridged comedy into authorship. His childhood appeared stable, but habits formed early. Evans began smoking heavily as a teenager, and it later defined his health. After moving to Los Angeles, he studied drama and entered television at a time when black actors faced narrow casting and constant scrutiny. The role of Lionel opened doors but also set limits. Marriage did not ease the strain. Evans married during his early success, yet industry pressure and professional frustration followed him home. Arguments became frequent, and the marriage ended in divorce in 1980, leaving him emotionally detached and increasingly focused on work rather than intimacy. That focus changed television history. Evans stepped away from acting momentum to co-create and write Good Times, 1974 to 1979, shifting from performer to architect. The move brought respect, but also conflict, as creative battles and racial politics in Hollywood drained energy. His health quietly declined as smoking continued. Finally, he died at 57 years old on December 14, 2006, from throat cancer, after a rapid 3-month physical collapse in California. His estimated $1 million net worth, built from acting, writing Good Times, and real estate investments, marked the end of a career that burned brightest behind the scenes. Alan Melvin as Barney Hefner. Alan Melvin was born on February 18, 1923, in Kansas City, Missouri. At 48 years old, he played Barney Hefner, Archie Bunker's rough-edged but loyal drinking buddy, in All in the Family, 1971. The role deepened the show's sense of everyday realism, turning side conversations into quiet mirrors of middle-class decay. That grounded presence came from a life without early drama, but shaped by pressure later on. Melvin's childhood was stable, yet adulthood arrived with disruption when Hollywood's political blacklists narrowed opportunities. He pivoted hard, taking supporting parts and later voice work, while still anchoring memorable roles like Sam the Butcher on The Brady Bunch. Marriage carried its own weight. Melvin married Amalia Faustina Sestero in 1944, and the union lasted nearly 60 years, producing 2 children. Behind that longevity sat strain from severe alcoholism, which repeatedly destabilized the household. His wife absorbed much of the burden, holding the family together while his work rhythm and drinking collided. Health followed habit. Years of stress and addiction took their toll, and Melvin was eventually diagnosed with lung cancer. Even as his screen presence narrowed to voiceover work, ending with Scooby-Doo projects, his physical strength declined steadily, closing the long arc of a relentless working actor. Alan Melvin died at 84 years old on January 17, 2008, in Brentwood, Los Angeles, from lung cancer. He was buried at Westwood Memorial Cemetery. His estimated $800,000 net worth, earned through decades of television and voice acting, reflected consistency rather than stardom. Jason Wingreen as Harry Snowden. Jason Wingreen was born on October 9, 1920, in Brooklyn, New York. At 51 years old, he played Harry Snowden, the weary bartender and quiet observer, in All in the Family, 1971. The role gave the series its pauses, moments where silence carried more truth than argument. Those silences traced back to war. Wingreen served in the U.S. Army Air Forces during World War II and later carried psychological scars that never fully healed. He returned to acting with discipline, co-founding Circle in the Square Theater and appearing in projects like The Twilight Zone and The Untouchables. Yet the memories followed him into every room. Marriage became fragile under that weight. Wingreen married Gloria Scott Back, and they had one son, but alcohol slowly widened the distance between them. The relationship remained intact on paper while emotionally fractured, leaving him increasingly isolated inside his own home. Professional disappointment sharpened the isolation. In 1980, Wingreen voiced Boba Fett in Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, only to have the role redubbed years later due to contract disputes. The loss hit deeply. Depression followed, then Parkinson's disease, which gradually robbed him of speech and independence. Jason Wingreen died at 95 years old on December 25, 2015, at his home in Los Angeles, after years battling Parkinson's disease. He was survived by his son and grandchildren. His estimated $2 million net worth, built from decades of character roles, syndication residuals, and stock investments, closed a life remembered less for volume and more for endurance. Betty Garrett as Irene Lorenzo. Betty Garrett was born on May 23, 1919, in St. Joseph, Missouri. At 54 years old, she played Irene Lorenzo, Archie Bunker's sharp-tongued, politically liberal neighbor, in All in the Family, 1973. Irene disrupted Archie's comfort zone and gave the series one of its most quietly radical female counterweights. The confidence on screen contrasted with a childhood marked by instability rather than drama. Garrett's early years were financially modest, shaped by frequent moves and a father's alcoholism, which forced her and her mother into constant adjustment. Music and performance became refuge and ambition, leading to Broadway and later to MGM musicals, such as On the Town, 1949. Success arrived early, but it would not last uninterrupted. Marriage pulled her into history's crossfire. In 1944, Garrett married actor Larry Parks, and they had 2 sons. When Parks was targeted during the Hollywood blacklist of the 1950s due to Communist Party ties, Garrett's career collapsed alongside his. For nearly 7 years, she was pushed out of Hollywood, staying home while financial pressure and public suspicion hollowed the marriage from within. Illness followed survival. Garrett endured breast cancer, undergoing a mastectomy, and later developed heart failure after decades of stress. Even so, she rebuilt her career in television, earning acclaim on All in the Family and later Laverne and Shirley. When Parks died suddenly of a heart attack in 1975, she was left widowed, raising their sons alone while working to stay visible. Betty Garrett died at 91 years old on February 12, 2011, from heart failure in Los Angeles. Her estimated $2 million net worth, built from Broadway, classic MGM musicals, and television salaries, closed a life defined not by uninterrupted fame, but by return. Vincent Gardenia as Frank Lorenzo. Vincent Gardenia was born on January 7, 1920, in Naples, Italy. At 53 years old, he played Frank Lorenzo, the blustering old-world neighbor, in All in the Family, 1973. The role sharpened the show's portrait of immigrant masculinity and cultural friction. His reserve began early. Gardenia grew up in poverty before immigrating to Brooklyn as a child, absorbing hardship and emotional restraint. Acting entered his life young through Italian-language theater, but survival mattered more than expression. Even as his talent bloomed on stage, he avoided deep attachments, choosing work over closeness. Films like Bang the Drum Slowly and later Moonstruck proved his range without softening his isolation. He never married. Gardenia feared commitment would dilute his discipline and derail his stage focus. Scripts replaced family, rehearsals replaced home. While peers chased Hollywood expansion, he remained loyal to theater, winning a Tony Award and multiple Obies, but quietly sacrificing broader fame. Health gave no warning. Touring with the stage comedy Breaking Legs in Philadelphia in 1992, Gardenia completed an evening performance, returned to his hotel, and made one final phone call. The next morning, he was found dead of a heart attack, fully dressed, the phone still in his hand. He died at 72 years old on December 9, 1992. With an estimated $3 million net worth earned from stage, television, film, and awards, he left behind no spouse or children, only performances that refused to fade. Bob Hastings as Tommy Kelsey. Bob Hastings was born on April 18, 1925, in Brooklyn, New York. At 46 years old, he played Tommy Kelsey, the steady bar owner and quiet witness to Archie Bunker's world, in All in the Family, 1971. The role added texture to the series, grounding explosive debates in familiar everyday space. That calm exterior was forged early. Hastings' childhood in Brooklyn was stable, but everything changed during World War II, when he served as a B-29 navigator and witnessed the devastation surrounding D-Day. Those memories never left. After returning home, he buried himself in work, moving from radio to television, building a dependable career with roles in McHale's Navy and early live TV dramas. Marriage became both anchor and strain. Hastings married Joan Rice in 1948, and together they raised 4 children. The marriage lasted decades, but untreated PTSD led to alcoholism and emotional volatility. Joan carried much of the family's daily burden, holding stability together while Hastings fought inner battles he rarely spoke about. Health arrived as the final test. In later years, Hastings was diagnosed with prostate cancer, continuing voice work and occasional appearances as long as strength allowed. His voice, familiar to generations as Commissioner Gordon in DC animation, outlived his physical presence. Bob Hastings died at 89 years old on June 30th, 2014, from prostate cancer. A funeral mass was held in Burbank, California. His estimated $1.5 million net worth, earned through decades of television, film, and voice acting, reflected a career built on reliability rather than spotlight. Mel Stewart as Henry Jefferson. Mel Stewart was born on September 19, 1929, in Ohio. At 42 years old, he played Henry Jefferson, George Jefferson's principled, introspective brother, in All in the Family, 1971. The character softened the Jefferson family dynamic and introduced moral weight beneath the comedy. His early life was outwardly ordinary, but adulthood pulled him toward conflict. Stewart became deeply involved in the civil rights movement, aligning art with activism. That visibility brought pressure. His political work drew FBI surveillance, creating constant tension that followed him home even as his acting career expanded through projects like Scarecrow and Mrs. King. Marriage struggled under distance. Stewart married Annie Dong in 1976, and they had a daughter together. His activism and teaching work kept him away for long stretches. Annie lived with quiet fear for his safety, while Stewart wrestled with guilt over absence. The family bond remained intact, but emotionally strained. Illness slowly erased the man behind the mission. Stewart developed Alzheimer's disease, losing memory, recognition, and eventually speech. Finally, he died at 72 years old on February 24, 2002, from complications of Alzheimer's disease. He left behind his wife and daughter. His estimated $1 million net worth, built from acting, directing, teaching, and production, closed the story of a life spent choosing purpose, even when it cost him peace. All in the Family 1971 wasn't just a sitcom. It was a mirror that followed its cast long after the laughter faded. Fame arrived fast, but time reshaped everything. Careers stalled. Battles were hidden, love was tested, and legacies were sealed in ways no script could predict. So when you look at the All in the Family cast, then and now, what stands out more? Who they were on screen, or what life demanded of them afterward? If this story changed the way you see the show, subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us for more untold journeys behind television's most unforgettable faces.